"Stand way in the back," my wife hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Do not embarrass our daughter tonight." I did as I was told, blending into the shadows of the ballroom like the janitor they all thought I was. I watched them laugh, clink crystal glasses, and pretend to be royalty. But then, the room went dead silent. Arthur Sterling, the tech billionaire everyone was desperate to impress, walked through the double doors. My wife Beatrice rushed forward, her hand extended, a desperate smile plastered on her face. My son-in-law Hunter puffed out his chest, ready to beg for a deal. Arthur ignored them both. He looked right through them, as if they were made of glass. He walked past the executives, past the champagne towers, and came straight into the dark corner where I was hiding. He fell to his knees in front of me, grabbed my rough, calloused hands, and wept. "I found you," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I have been looking for you for 40 years, Elroy." The glass of wine dropped from my wife's hand and shattered on the floor. But before I tell you how my family destroyed themselves that night, let me introduce myself. I am Elroy Jenkins, and this is the story of how I let them dig their own graves. Before I continue this story, please like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. It started 3 hours before the party. I stood in the middle of the master bedroom, staring at the empty wire hanger where my navy blue suit used to be. It was an old suit, yes. The elbows were worn thin, and the style was 20 years out of date, but it was clean. It was dignified. It was the suit I wore to church every Sunday. "Beatrice," I called out, my voice raspy from years of inhaling industrial cleaning chemicals. "Where is my suit?" Beatrice walked into the room, holding a plastic garment bag that smelled of cheap polyester and stale closet air. She didn't even look at me. She was too busy adjusting her pearl necklace in the vanity mirror, admiring a reflection that looked younger than her 65 years, thanks to expensive creams bought with my pension. "In the trash, Roy," she said coldly, "where it belongs." She threw the plastic bag onto the bed. "Put this on. It is a tuxedo rental. I got the cheapest one they had. It looks exactly like a server's uniform, which is perfect because if anyone asks who you are just helping out with the catering." I felt a sharp sting in my chest, a familiar pain that I had learned to swallow over 40 years of marriage. I never fought back. I learned a long time ago that fighting Beatrice was like fighting a hurricane with a paper umbrella. I walked over to the wastebasket in the corner. There it was, my blue suit, crumpled up among used tissues and makeup wipes. I reached down, my joints popping with age, but I wasn't reaching for the fabric. I was reaching for the small, tarnished brass pin attached to the lapel. It was shaped like a simple mechanical gear. My father had given it to me the day I got my first job mopping floors. It was worth nothing to a pawnbroker, but it meant the world to me. "Don't you dare put that trash on the new tux," Beatrice snapped, watching me through the mirror. "You look like a walking antique store." I ignored her for the first time that day. I slipped the small brass pin into my pocket, feeling its cold metal against my thigh. "Hurry up," she commanded, spraying a cloud of perfume that made my eyes water. "Hunter is waiting outside in the Mercedes. Do not make us late for Kendra's big night. She wants everything to be perfect, and that means you need to be invisible." I changed into the rental tuxedo. The pants were too short, exposing my ankles, and the jacket was tight around the shoulders. I looked ridiculous. I looked exactly like what she wanted me to be, a servant. I walked out to the driveway, the cold November wind biting at my exposed skin. My son-in-law, Hunter, was leaning against his silver Mercedes, checking his reflection in the window. He was a 35-year-old white man with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. He was a real estate agent who hadn't sold a house in 6 months, but he walked around with the arrogance of a man who owned Manhattan. When he saw me coming down the porch steps, he didn't open the door. He didn't smile. He wrinkled his nose in exaggerated disgust. "Jesus, Beatrice," he groaned as my wife walked out behind me. "He smells like bleach and old people. Did you spray him down?" I hadn't touched a mop in 10 years. I smelled like soap and the peppermint candy I kept in my pocket. But to Hunter, I would always be the help. He unlocked the doors with a beep of his key fob, but before I could reach for the handle, he stopped me. "Careful, Roy," he warned. "Do not scuff the leather. This is a lease and I am upgrading next month when your daughter gets her bonus." I climbed into the back seat, squeezing my legs together to take up as little space as possible. The car interior was warm and smelled of new leather, a luxury I rarely experienced. My own truck was a 15-year-old Ford that rattled when it hit 40 miles per hour. Beatrice sat in the front passenger seat, immediately turning the visor mirror to check her lipstick again. Hunter started the engine, and then, without a word, he rolled down both rear windows. The freezing air blasted into the car, hitting me directly in the face. It was 30 degrees outside. "Hunter," I said softly, my teeth starting to chatter, "could you roll the window up, please? It is very cold." Hunter made eye contact with me in the rearview mirror. His eyes were cold blue ice. "No can do, Roy. I cannot have your scent sticking to the upholstery. We are picking up a potential investor next week. Just breathe the fresh air. It will do you good." He then picked up a bottle of expensive cologne from the center console and sprayed it liberally into the air, creating a chemical fog that made me cough. Beatrice didn't say a word. She just turned up the radio to drown out my coughing. We drove in silence toward the city center. I watched the buildings pass by, the steel and glass structures that define the skyline. Hunter and Beatrice talked about the party, about who would be there, about how much money Kendra would be making as the new marketing director. They talked about buying a boat. They talked about a vacation to Italy. They talked about spending money they didn't have yet. "Listen, Roy," Hunter said as we approached the downtown district. The car slowed down, but we weren't at the venue yet. We were 3 blocks away. "We are parking at the VIP entrance because I need the valet to see the car. But you are not getting out there." "Why not?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Because I am not having you crawl out of the back seat of my Mercedes looking like a lost penguin in front of the partners," Hunter snapped. "You get out here, at the corner of 5th and Main. Walk the rest of the way. It will give you time to air out." "But my knees," I protested weakly. The arthritis had been bad this week. The doctor said I shouldn't walk long distances in the cold. "It is 3 blocks, Roy," Beatrice cut in, her voice sharp. "Stop being dramatic. The exercise is good for your heart. Get out. Now." Hunter unlocked the doors. I looked at my wife, hoping for a shred of mercy, but she was busy texting on her phone. I opened the door and stepped out onto the curb. The wind hit me instantly, cutting through the thin rental tuxedo. I watched the silver Mercedes speed away, its taillights fading into the traffic. I stood there for a moment, adjusting my collar, feeling the brass pin in my pocket for comfort. They didn't know. They had no idea that the building they were driving to, the Sterling Tower, was a place I knew better than the architect who designed it. I knew which elevators squeaked on the 4th floor. I knew which air vents rattled when the wind blew from the east. And I knew the secrets buried in the foundation. I began to walk. My knees ached with every step, a sharp, grinding pain that shot up my legs. I kept my head down, fighting the wind. When I finally reached the Sterling Tower, the main entrance was a blaze of lights. Luxury cars were lining up. Women in gowns that cost thousands of dollars were stepping out onto a red carpet. I approached the glass doors, my hands numb. A large security guard in a black suit stepped directly in my path, his hand landing heavy on my chest. "Whoa there, Pops," he said dismissively, looking me up and down. "Service entrance is around the back. Catering staff enters through the alley next to the dumpsters." I looked up at him. "I am not catering," I said, my voice steady despite the cold. "I am Kendra Jenkins' father. She is the guest of honor." The guard laughed. A short, barking laugh. "Yeah, and I am the King of England. Look at you. You are wearing a rental that doesn't fit, and you walked here. I saw you coming from down the block. Please move along before I have to remove you. You are disturbing the guests." I was about to reach into my shoe, where I had hidden something important, when a hand grabbed my arm. It was sharp and painful. Beatrice. She had come out of the lobby, not to save me, but to silence me. "There you are," she hissed, her fingernails digging into my bicep through the cheap jacket. "Stop making a scene." She smiled at the guard, a fake, dazzling smile. "I am so sorry. He is a little confused. He is with us, unfortunately." She dragged me inside, past the warmth of the heaters, past the beautiful ice sculpture in the foyer. But she didn't lead me to the ballroom floor, where the waiters were passing out hors d'oeuvres. She dragged me past the coat check, down a side hallway, and shoved me into a dark alcove right next to the entrance of the men's restroom. It was a spot hidden by a large potted fern. "Stay here," she ordered, pointing a manicured finger in my face. "Do not move. Do not speak to anyone. If someone asks who you are, you tell them you are waiting for a mop because there was a spill. Do not dare come out and talk to Hunter's friends. He is trying to close a deal tonight, and he doesn't need his father-in-law looking like a charity case in the background. I stood there in the shadows, listening to the music and laughter drifting from the main room. I watched my wife smooth her dress, check her teeth in a compact mirror, and walk back into the light, leaving me standing next to the bathroom door. She thought she had hidden me away. She thought I was just a shameful secret to be kept in the dark. She didn't know that the man who owned this building, the man whose name was on the sign outside, was the only person in the world who knew who I really was, and he was on his way. From my vantage point in the shadows beside the men's restroom, I watched the ballroom transform into a theater of my own erasure. The lights dimmed, and a single spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the center stage where my daughter Kendra stood. She looked beautiful in her silk gown, holding a crystal microphone, like a queen holding a scepter. I wanted to feel pride. I wanted to feel that familiar swell in my chest that a father feels when his child succeeds. Instead, I felt a cold hollowness spreading through my gut. "Thank you all for coming," Kendra said, her voice projecting clear and confident across the room. "This promotion represents 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears, but I did not get here alone." She paused for dramatic effect, and her eyes scanned the front row of the VIP tables. "I want to thank the woman who made me who I am, my mother, Beatrice. You taught me that strength is a choice, and that we must always strive for perfection. You were my rock, my guide, and my inspiration." The crowd applauded. Beatrice stood up, beaming, waving her hand with the grace of a woman who believed she had single-handedly sculpted a masterpiece. I stood in the dark, gripping the handle of the fern pot, waiting for my name. I waited for her to say, "And my father, who worked double shifts to pay for my textbooks." I waited for her to mention the man who drove her to every interview, who sat up with her when she failed her first exam. But the silence stretched on, and of course Kendra continued smiling at the table where Hunter sat. "To my husband Hunter, you are the visionary of our family. Your ambition pushes me to be better every single day. Thank you for building this life with me." There was more applause, more cheers, but there was no mention of Elroy Jenkins. I had been edited out of my own daughter's life story, like a coffee stain removed from a photograph. I leaned back against the cold tile wall, feeling the brass pin in my pocket pressing against my leg. It was the only thing that felt real. A few feet away from my hiding spot, Hunter was holding court with a group of young executives. He held a glass of scotch in one hand and gestured expansively with the other. One of the men, a young associate with eager eyes, nodded toward the shadows where I stood. "Who is that old guy over there?" the associate asked, lowering his voice. "He has been staring at the stage for 10 minutes. Is he security?" Hunter laughed, a dry, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. "Him no. That is just Elroy. He is a distant uncle on Beatrice's side. Poor guy is not all there upstairs, if you know what I mean. We let him come so he wouldn't wander off into traffic, but we try to keep him out of the way. He gets confused easily, thinks he is part of the staff sometimes. Just ignore him." The young associate nodded, looking at me with a mixture of pity and revulsion. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Distant uncle, senile, confused. My son-in-law had reduced 40 years of fatherhood to a charitable act of babysitting a mental patient. I wanted to step out into the light. I wanted to grab the microphone and scream the truth until the crystal chandeliers shook. But I didn't. I stayed in the dark because I knew that making a scene would only prove them right. Then the energy in the room shifted instantly. It wasn't a gradual change. It was immediate, like the air being sucked out of an airlock. The music stopped. The chatter died down to a hushed whisper. The heavy oak doors at the main entrance swung open, and a silence heavy with awe and fear descended upon the room. Arthur Sterling had arrived. He didn't walk, he glided. He was a man of 70, but he moved with the vigor of someone half his age. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, midnight blue with a black lapel. His silver hair was combed back perfectly, and his eyes behind rimless glasses scanned the room with the precision of a hawk hunting for field mice. He was the man who built this city's tech infrastructure. He was the man who signed the paychecks of half the people in this room. He was a god in this world of glass and steel. Beatrice was the first to move. She practically leaped from her chair, smoothing her dress with frantic hands. She elbowed her way through the crowd, dragging Hunter with her. I watched them scramble. It was pathetic. It was desperate. They looked like starving pigeons fighting for a crumb of bread. Mr. Sterling Beatrice, breathless and beaming, thrust herself into his path. She extended her hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. What an honor. I am Beatrice Jenkins, Kendra's mother. We are so delighted you could grace us with your presence. Hunter stepped up beside her, puffing out his chest, extending his hand as well. Hunter Vance, sir. Big fan of your work on the downtown grid. I have some ideas about real estate synergy that I would love to run by you. Arthur Sterling didn't even slow down. He didn't look at Beatrice's hand. He didn't acknowledge Hunter's existence. He looked right through them, as if they were made of mist. He walked past them, forcing Beatrice to step back awkwardly to avoid being run over. The smile froze on her face, cracking at the edges. Her hand remained extended for a second too long, grasping at empty air, before she dropped it to her side, burning with humiliation. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Nobody ignored Beatrice Jenkins at her own party. But Arthur Sterling wasn't just anybody. He continued walking, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance. He walked past the marketing executives who had prepared elevator pitches. He walked past the waiters holding trays of caviar. He walked past the bar where the expensive scotch was being poured. He was heading straight for the restrooms, straight for the dark alcove, straight for me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide inside the bathroom stall and lock the door. I looked down at my ill-fitting rental tuxedo, my scuffed shoes. I looked like a clown compared to him. But my feet were rooted to the floor. Arthur stopped 3 feet away from me. The crowd behind him formed a semicircle, watching with bated breath. They were confused. Why was the billionaire staring at the senile uncle? Why was the most powerful man in the city standing in front of the bathrooms? Arthur looked me up and down. His face was unreadable. Then he did something that made the entire room gasp. He got down on one knee. He didn't kneel like a man proposing. He kneeled like a soldier, showing respect to a commander. He lowered himself to the carpet, regardless of his expensive suit, until he was looking up at me. He reached out and adjusted the lapel of my cheap jacket, brushing away a speck of lint with a tenderness that shocked me. His eyes were wet. I saw tears welling up behind his glasses. "I found you," he whispered, his voice trembling with an emotion so raw it echoed in the silent hall. "I have been looking for you for 40 years, Elroy." The sound of my name on his lips was like a thunderclap. He knew me. He remembered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small brass gear pin. My hand shook as I held it out. Arthur looked at it, and a single tear escaped his eye, tracking down his cheek. "You kept it," he said softly. "You kept the promise." I swallowed hard the lump in my throat, making it difficult to speak. "I never break a promise, Arthur. You know that." Beatrice's voice cut through the moment like a shrill alarm bell. She pushed through the crowd, her face pale with panic. She grabbed Arthur's shoulder, trying to pull him up, trying to break the connection. "Mr. Sterling, please get up," she stammered, her laugh high and nervous. "You are confused. This is just my husband. He is not well. He gets confused, faces mixed up. He used to work maintenance here years ago, so maybe you saw him mopping a floor once." She turned to the crowd, her eyes wide and desperate. "He is a little senile, everyone. Please forgive him. He thinks he knows everyone." She looked at me with a gaze so full of hatred it almost burned my skin. "Go to the car, Roy," she hissed. "Now." Arthur slowly stood up. He didn't look at Beatrice. He didn't look at Hunter, who was standing there with his mouth open. He looked only at me. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sleek, heavy metal card. He pressed it into my hand and closed my fingers around it. "Call me," he said. "Tonight. It is time to execute the golden protocol." Then he turned and walked away, leaving my wife standing there looking like a fool, leaving the room in a stunned silence that was louder than any applause. I looked at the card in my hand. It was black titanium with a single gold number embossed on it. I looked up and saw Hunter marching toward me, his face red with rage. The game had changed, but they didn't know the rules yet. They didn't know that the senile old man in the corner had just been handed the keys to their destruction. The silver Mercedes screeched into the driveway, and before the engine had even stopped humming, Hunter threw his door open and stormed toward the house. My wife, Beatrice, was right behind him, her heels clicking furiously on the pavement, like the ticking of a bomb about to detonate. I barely had time to unbuckle my seatbelt and step out into the cold night air before they were already inside, leaving the front door wide open. I walked up the steps, my knees aching from the earlier walk, and the weight of the night pressing down on me. I stepped into the foyer and closed the door behind me, my hands still lingering on the brass knob. Hunter was waiting for me. He stood in the center of the living room, his face a mask of red fury, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He didn't wait for me to take off my coat. He didn't wait for me to speak. He lunged forward, covering the distance between us in 2 long strides. "You think you are funny, old man?" he roared. The back of his hand connected with my cheek with a wet, cracking sound. The force of the blow was unexpected. It sent me stumbling backward, my legs tangling in the rug until I collapsed into the old leather recliner. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the hardwood floor. My cheek burned with a sharp, stinging heat, and I tasted iron in my mouth. I touched my lip and my fingers came away bloody. Hunter stood over me, breathing heavy, his chest heaving. "You think you can humiliate us like that? You think you can hire some 2-bit actor to play Arthur Sterling and make a scene at my wife's party?" I looked up at him, blinking to clear the dizziness. "An actor," I whispered, my voice thick. "You think that was an actor?" "Do not play dumb with me," Roy Hunter spat. "I know you. I know you possess this pathetic need for attention. You saw Kendra shining. You saw us succeeding, and you couldn't stand being the janitor in the corner. So what did you do? Did you spend your entire pension hiring a look-alike? Did you pay him to kneel in front of you so you could feel like a big man for 5 seconds? He began to pace the room, kicking at the furniture. It was a stunt, a pathetic, sad stunt. Arthur Sterling does not know you. Arthur Sterling does not kneel for anyone. You made us look like fools, waiting for a punchline that never came. I said nothing. I sat in the chair watching him unravel. His ego was so fragile that he had to invent a conspiracy theory rather than accept that his father-in-law might be someone of value. He couldn't process the reality, so he rejected it violently. "How much did you pay him?" Hunter screamed, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. "How much did you waste on that little performance while we are struggling to pay the mortgage? You are selfish. You are a selfish, senile old man who would rather burn down his daughter's reputation than sit quietly in the dark where you belong." Beatrice entered the room then. She didn't look at my bleeding lip. She didn't look at Hunter, who was shaking with rage. Her eyes were fixed on my chest, specifically the pocket of the cheap rental tuxedo where she had seen Arthur slip the metal card. She walked toward me with a terrifying focus. Her desperation was different from Hunter's. It wasn't born of pride, but of pure, unadulterated greed. She had seen the gold glint on that black card. She knew Arthur Sterling didn't hand out business cards to janitors unless they were worth something. "Get up," she commanded, her voice ice cold. I stayed seated, gripping the arms of the chair. "Beatrice, I am tired." She didn't let me finish. She pounced on me, her manicured hands grabbing the lapels of my jacket. She wasn't my wife in that moment. She was a scavenger, picking at a carcass. "Give it to me," she hissed. She jammed her hand into my breast pocket, her sharp nails scratching through the thin fabric and digging into my skin. She felt around frantically, her breathing ragged. "Where is it, Roy? Where is the card he gave you?" I sat stoically, letting her violate my personal space, letting her rummage through my clothes like a common thief. "It is not there, Beatrice," I said calmly. "Liar!" she shrieked. "I saw him put it there. I saw it with my own eyes. Do not lie to me, you old fool. Giving that card to you is like giving a diamond to a monkey. You do not know what to do with it. You will just lose it or throw it away." She ripped her hand out of the pocket, the sound of cheap polyester tearing filling the room. The pocket hung open like a torn mouth, empty. She grabbed the other pocket, ripping the lining, turning it inside out. Nothing. She patted down my sides, her hands slapping against my ribs, searching my pants pockets, my waistband. She was frantic, her hair coming loose from its perfect bun, her eyes wide and wild. She looked at the floor, checking the rug around the chair. She looked under the cushion. "Where did you hide it?" she demanded, grabbing my face and forcing me to look at her. "You are hiding it from us. Why? We are your family. That card could be an investment opportunity. It could be a direct line to the Sterling fortune. Hunter needs that contact. Kendra needs that contact. You are just going to waste it. I looked into her eyes, the eyes of the woman I had shared a bed with for 40 years, and I saw absolutely nothing but hunger. She didn't care that her husband had just been assaulted by her son-in-law. She didn't care that I was bleeding. She only cared about the access she thought I was withholding. I lost it. I lied. My voice flat. It fell out when I was walking to the car. My hands were cold. I dropped it. Beatrice stared at me for a long moment, her chest heaving. Then she let out a scream of pure frustration and shoved me back into the chair. "You useless idiot," she spat. "You ruin everything. You finally get handed a golden ticket, and you drop it in the gutter because you are too clumsy to hold on to anything of value." She turned away from me, disgusted, walking to the window to stare out into the dark street, as if she could see the lost opportunity floating away in the wind. I felt the cold metal of the black titanium card pressing against the sole of my foot inside my right shoe. I had slipped it there the moment I got into the back seat of the Mercedes, knowing they would come for it. It was safe. And as long as it was safe, they had no power over me. Hunter stopped pacing. He watched Beatrice's defeat, and his expression shifted. The red-hot rage cooled into something sharper, something more calculating. He adjusted his cufflinks and smoothed down his hair, taking a deep breath to compose himself. He looked at me, not with anger anymore, but with the look a butcher gives a cow before the slaughter. "Fine," he said, his voice dropping to a low, reasonable tone that was somehow more terrifying than his screaming. "You lost the card. Or you hired an actor. It does not matter. What matters is that we have a situation here, Roy." He walked over to the sideboard where he kept his briefcase. He clicked the latches open and pulled out a crisp, white document. He had prepared it. He had this ready, waiting for the right moment. He walked back to me and held the paper out. "Since you are clearly confused, since you are hiring actors and losing valuable contacts, it is obvious you are no longer capable of managing your own affairs," he said. I looked at the document. At the top, in bold black letters, it read, "General Durable Power of Attorney." Hunter pulled a pen from his pocket and clicked it. "We are going to fix this. You are going to sign this document, Roy. It gives me full authority to act on your behalf. If Sterling really did give you a contact, I will find it. I will contact his office as your legal representative. I will explain that you are not well and that all business matters should go through me." I looked at the pen hovering in front of my face. "I am not signing that, Hunter," I said. "I am perfectly capable of handling my own business." Hunter smiled, a cold, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Are you really? Because from where I am standing, you look like a man who is one step away from wandering into traffic. You are a liability, Roy." He leaned in closer, the smell of his expensive cologne mixing with the metallic scent of my own blood. "Here is how this is going to go. You sign this paper and we go to bed. We wake up tomorrow and we pretend this nightmare never happened. Or you refuse." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the threat hang heavy in the air. "If you refuse, I make a phone call. I have a friend who runs the Sunshine Meadows facility down in the county. It is the cheapest, state-funded nursing home in the state. I hear they have a bed open in the dementia ward. It smells like urine and boiled cabbage, Roy. The orderlies are not known for their gentle touch. And once you are in there, once a doctor signs off that you are a danger to yourself, good luck getting out." Beatrice turned from the window. She didn't object. She didn't defend me. She just nodded, her face hard and unyielding. "It is for your own good, Roy," she said. "You clearly need help. Sign the paper." I looked at the two of them, my family, my executioners. They were giving me a choice between surrendering my freedom or being thrown into a hole to die. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was a helpless old man with no options. They didn't know that I had the most powerful man in the city waiting for my call. "I will not sign," I said quietly. Hunter straightened up and capped the pen with a loud click. "Have it your way, old man. Enjoy your last night in a real bed. Tomorrow morning I am making that call." He turned and walked out of the room, Beatrice following him without a backward glance. They left me sitting in the dark, blood drying on my lip, the weight of the card in my shoe burning like a brand. They thought they had won. They thought the game was over, but they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had threatened a man who had nothing left to lose, and tomorrow I was going to show them exactly what that meant. The sun came up gray and unforgiving the next morning. I woke up on the stiff mattress in the guest room, my back aching from the previous night's assault. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually at 6 in the morning, I would hear the click of claws on the hardwood floor. Buster, my 12-year-old retriever, would be waiting by the door, tail thumping a slow rhythm against the frame. He was arthritic, blind in one eye, and the only living soul in this house who looked at me with love. "Buster," I called out, my voice raspy. There was no sound. I pushed myself up, ignoring the dizziness that washed over me. I walked into the hallway. The dog bed in the corner was gone. The water bowl was gone. The leash that usually hung by the coat rack was missing. A cold knot formed in my stomach, tighter and heavier than the hunger I felt. I walked into the kitchen. Hunter was sitting at the island, eating a bagel with cream cheese. He didn't look up when I entered. He just kept chewing, staring at his phone. "Where's my dog?" I asked. Hunter took a sip of coffee before turning his head. He looked at me with a boredom that was more insulting than anger. "The mud," he said casually. "I got rid of him." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You what?" "I got rid of him," Hunter repeated, slower this time as if speaking to a child. "Look, Roy, we are cutting costs. Do you know how much dog food costs? Do you know how much the vet bills are for an animal that old? We are bleeding money here, and I am not going to finance a useless animal just so you have something to pet." "Where is he?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Did you take him to the shelter?" Hunter laughed. "A shelter? No. They charge a surrender fee. I am not paying them to take a problem off my hands. I found a guy. He runs a rendering plant a few counties over. He gave me $50 for him. Said he needed practice targets for his pit bulls or something. I didn't ask questions. I just took the 50. The room spun. He had sold my best friend. He had sold a gentle old soul to be torn apart for $50. I looked at the man sitting in my kitchen wearing a silk robe, eating a bagel, and I realized that he wasn't just selfish. He was evil. He enjoyed the cruelty. He enjoyed taking the one thing that brought me comfort. "You sold him," I whispered. "We needed the money," Roy Hunter snapped, slamming his hand on the counter. $50 is $50. Maybe if you contributed something to this household besides your medical bills and your whining, I wouldn't have to make these hard decisions. Now get out of my face. I am waiting for Kendra." I stood there shaking. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to hurt him the way he had hurt me, but I knew I couldn't win a physical fight. Not against him. Not today. I turned and walked to the sink, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. I had to focus. I had to remember the card in my shoe. I had to remember that revenge is a dish best served cold, and Hunter had just served me ice. The front door opened, and my daughter Kendra rushed in. She wasn't the poised executive I had seen on stage the night before. Her hair was messy, her eyes were red and swollen, and she was wearing a tracksuit instead of her usual power suit. She looked frantic. "Daddy," she cried, spotting me by the sink. "Oh, Daddy, thank God you were here." She ran to me and threw her arms around my neck, sobbing into my chest. For a second, just a fleeting second, I wanted to hug her back. I wanted to be her father again. But then I smelled the expensive perfume she wore, the same perfume she had worn while ignoring me at her party. I stood rigid, my arms at my sides. "What is wrong, Kendra?" I asked, my voice flat. She pulled back, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "It is a disaster, Daddy. A complete disaster. We are going to lose everything." Hunter stood up from his stool, his face pale. "Did you talk to them?" he asked, his voice tight. Kendra nodded, looking between me and her husband. "They gave us 48 hours, Hunter. They said if we do not have the money, they are going to come for us. They said they will break your legs first and then come for me." "Who?" I asked. "Who is coming?" Kendra looked at me, her lower lip trembling. She grabbed my hand, squeezing it hard. "Daddy, Hunter is in trouble. He made some investments that didn't work out. He borrowed money from some bad people, private lenders, loan sharks," I corrected. She nodded rapidly. "Yes, loan sharks. He owes them $200,000, Daddy. The interest has compounded, and they are not waiting anymore. They came to his office yesterday. They threatened him." I looked at Hunter. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sweaty desperation. He wasn't the master of the universe anymore. He was a scared little boy who had played with fire. 200,000, I said. "And what does this have to do with me?" Kendra dropped to her knees. She actually knelt on the kitchen floor, ruining her expensive tracksuit, clutching my hand like a lifeline. "We need the money, Daddy. We have maxed out our cards. We have nothing liquid. You are the only one who can help us." "I have a pension, Kendra," I said. "I get $1,200 a month. You know this." "Not your pension," she cried. "The house. This house." I looked around the kitchen. This house had belonged to my parents. It was old, and the pipes rattled, and the roof needed patching. But it was the only thing I owned. It was the only thing in my name. "Sell the house, Daddy," Kendra begged. "It is worth at least $250 in this market. If you sell it, we can pay off the debt. We can save Hunter. We can save the family reputation. Please, Daddy, do it for me. Do it for your little girl." I looked down at her. I saw the manipulation in her eyes. She wasn't crying because she loved me. She wasn't crying because she was worried about my well-being. She was crying because her husband's gambling debts were threatening her comfortable life. She wanted me to sell my home, my legacy, and give it to the man who had sold my dog for $50 an hour ago. She wanted me to be homeless so she could keep her status. I pulled my hand away from her grip. She looked up at me, shocked. "No," I said. "What?" she whispered. I said no, I repeated firmly. "I am not selling my father's house to pay for your husband's stupidity." Hunter made a noise in the back of his throat, a growl of pure frustration. He kicked the bar stool, sending it crashing to the floor. "You selfish old man," he shouted, marching toward me. "You are going to let them kill me. You are going to let them hurt your daughter. What do you need this house for anyway? You are going to be dead in 10 years. We are the future. We need this money now." "It is my home," I said, meeting his gaze, "and you are not getting it. Besides," I added, lying smoothly, "it is not worth what you think. I took out a reverse mortgage 5 years ago to pay for your wedding, Kendra. The bank owns most of it." That was a lie. I had paid for her wedding with savings I earned scrubbing floors. The house was free and clear, but they didn't know that. Hunter's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He looked around the room, looking for something to destroy. His eyes landed on the 60-inch flat-screen television mounted on the wall, the one he watched his sports on while I cleaned the gutters. He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the counter and hurled it at the screen. The crash was deafening. Glass and electronics shattered, sparking and smoking. Kendra screamed, covering her ears. "You are lying," Hunter screamed, spitting flying from his mouth. "I checked the public records. There is no lien on this house. You are lying to me to hoard your assets." He stepped over the broken glass, advancing on me. I backed up until I hit the refrigerator. "You are going to sign that house over to us, Roy," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "You are going to sign it over today, because if you do not, accidents happen. Old men fall downstairs all the time. They slip in the tub. Their hearts just give out." He was threatening to kill me. He was standing in my kitchen, threatening my life over money he had squandered, and Kendra, my daughter, was still on the floor, weeping, not doing a single thing to stop him. She was letting him do this. She was complicit. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. The last thread of attachment, the last hope that they were redeemable, snapped. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, my voice trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Hunter laughed, a cruel, dark sound. "Yeah, you do that. You go clean yourself up, and when you come out, we are going to the notary. Do not make me come in there and drag you out." I walked past him, past Kendra, who couldn't even look me in the eye. I walked down the hall to the small bathroom near the back of the house. I went inside and locked the door, engaging the deadbolt. My hands were shaking. I turned on the faucet in the sink full blast. Then I turned on the shower. The sound of rushing water filled the small tiled room, creating a wall of white noise. I sat down on the edge of the toilet and took off my right shoe. My fingers fumbled with the insole, prying it up. There it was, the black titanium card. It was warm from my body heat. I pulled it out and stared at the gold number embossed on the front. No name, just a number. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old flip phone. Beatrice had tried to take it away months ago, saying I didn't need it, but I had hidden it. I dialed the number, my fingers pressing the buttons with deliberate force. It rang once. "Jenkins." A voice answered instantly. It was Arthur Sterling. He didn't ask who it was. He knew. I took a deep breath. I looked at the peeling paint on the bathroom wall. I thought about Buster, alone and scared in a cage. I thought about the fear in my daughter's eyes that was for herself, not for me. I thought about the bruise forming on my face. "Arthur," I said, my voice steady and cold as the grave. "It is me, Roy." "I am listening, Elroy," Arthur said. "Just give the word." I closed my eyes. I pictured the house crumbling. I pictured their world burning. "Execute the golden protocol," I said. Start it all. "Consider it done," Arthur replied. I hung up the phone and slipped the card back into my shoe. I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back wasn't a janitor. He wasn't a victim. He was the man who had just pulled the trigger. I turned off the water and unlocked the door, ready to face the wolves one last time. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, listening to the front door open. Heavy footsteps approached, followed by Hunter's voice, loud and performative. "Right in here, doctor. He's been acting erratic all day. Violent outbursts. He destroyed the living room television in a fit of rage." My jaw tightened. Hunter destroyed the television, but now it was part of the narrative of my insanity. The door swung open, and Hunter stepped in, followed by a man who looked less like a doctor and more like a used car salesman who had lost his license. He wore a white coat that was slightly yellowed at the collar and carried a battered leather bag. He didn't introduce himself. He just stared at me with watery, bloodshot eyes. "This is Dr. Thorne," Hunter announced, closing the door behind them. "He is a specialist in geriatric cognitive decline. He agreed to make a house call on short notice because of the severity of your condition." Dr. Thorne didn't wash his hands. He didn't take my blood pressure. He pulled a small pen light from his pocket and shined it directly into my eyes, blinding me for a moment. "Look at the pupil dilation," Thorne muttered, his breath smelling of stale tobacco and mints. Classic signs. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers cold and clammy. His grip was unnecessarily tight. "Do you know where you are, Mr. Jenkins? Do you know what year it is?" "I am in my own house," I said, pulling my arm away. "And it is the year my son-in-law is trying to steal it." Thorne looked at Hunter and shook his head gravely. "Paranoia, agitation, disorientation. It is exactly as you described on the phone." He pulled a prescription pad from his pocket, scribbling furiously. "This is acute dementia with violent tendencies," Thorne declared, ripping the page off. "It is advancing rapidly. At this stage, he is a danger to himself and others. I am recommending immediate chemical sedation followed by transfer to a secure facility." He didn't ask about my medical history. He didn't ask about my diet. He diagnosed me with a life-ending condition in under 2 minutes, based on a lie. "You heard him, Roy," Hunter said, a triumphant smirk plastering his face. "You are sick. We have to take care of you." Thorne handed the prescription to Hunter. "I have some samples in my bag, strong stuff. It will keep him docile until you can get the guardianship paperwork finalized. Give him 2 now. It will knock him out for 12 hours. I looked at the doctor. "How much did he pay you?" I asked quietly. Thorne didn't blink. He just packed his pen light away. "I am doing my job, sir, and my job is to protect families from dangerous individuals." They left the room, leaving me alone with the sinking realization that they had just escalated from theft to chemical restraint. They weren't just going to lock me away. They were going to drug me into oblivion so I couldn't fight back. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. This time it was Beatrice. She was holding a glass of water and 2 large, chalky blue pills in her palm. Her face was composed, her makeup perfect, the mask of the loving wife firmly in place. "Here we go, Roy," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "The doctor says these will help you relax. You have been so worked up lately. It is not good for your heart." She sat on the edge of the mattress, invading my space. She held out the pills. "I do not need these, Beatrice," I said, leaning back. "I am not crazy. Just take them," she snapped, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "Do not make me call Hunter back in here. He is very upset about the TV. If you take these, we can all get some rest." She pressed the pills to my lips. Her fingers were forceful. I realized I had no choice. If I fought, they would force them down my throat, or worse, inject me. I had to play their game. I opened my mouth. She tossed the pills onto my tongue and immediately brought the glass to my lips, tilting it so water rushed in. "Swallow," she commanded. I took a gulp of water, letting the liquid wash around the pills. I felt their bitter coating dissolving against my tongue. I swallowed the water, but with a practiced movement I had learned years ago to hide pain medication I didn't want to take, I slid the pills into the pouch of my cheek, tucking them deep between my gums and teeth. Beatrice watched my throat. She saw the swallow. "Good," she said, standing up. "Now sleep." As she turned to leave, I let out a racking, violent cough. It sounded wet and uncontrolled. I grabbed the handkerchief from my pocket and buried my face in it, hacking loudly. "Oh, for God's sake," Beatrice muttered, stepping back to avoid any germs. "Cover your mouth." I coughed again, retching slightly. In the folds of the white cotton handkerchief, I spat out the 2 blue pills along with a mouthful of saliva. I wiped my mouth, folding the handkerchief quickly and shoving it deep under my pillow. "I feel dizzy," I groaned, letting my eyelids droop. "That is the medicine working," Beatrice said, satisfied. "It acts fast. Just let go, Roy." She turned off the light and closed the door, the click of the lock echoing in the silence. I waited. I counted to 100 in my head, keeping my breathing slow and heavy, just in case they were listening at the door. Then I counted to 100 again. My body was tense, adrenaline coursing through my veins, but I forced my limbs to go limp. I had to look like a man under heavy sedation. The house settled. I heard the floorboards creak outside my room. I heard the murmur of voices drifting from the living room. They hadn't gone to bed. They were celebrating. I lay there in the dark, my eyes closed but my senses wide open. I focused on their voices, separating the words from the low hum of the refrigerator and the wind outside. "He is out cold," Beatrice's voice drifted down the hall. I checked. "He is snoring." "Good," Hunter replied. "Thorne said that dose would drop a horse. We have time now." I heard the clinking of glasses. They were drinking. "So what is the timeline?" Beatrice asked. Hunter's voice was confident, arrogant. I talked to the lawyer. "With Thorne's diagnosis on record, we can file for emergency temporary guardianship tomorrow. We cite imminent danger. The judge will sign it by noon. Once we have that, we can liquidate the assets immediately to pay for his care." "And the house?" Beatrice asked. "Sold," Hunter said. "I have a cash buyer lined up. We can close in 10 days. We pay off the sharks, we put Roy in Sunshine Meadows, and we have enough left over to get that condo in the city you wanted." "Sunshine Meadows," Beatrice mused. "Is that the one with the investigation? The one where patients were getting bed sores?" "Who cares?" Hunter laughed. "It is cheap. That is the priority." "Look, Beatrice, we have to be realistic. He is 69. He has worked hard his whole life. He is tired. We are doing him a favor. He won't know the difference. He will just fade away." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. Then Beatrice spoke, and her words were colder than the winter wind. "And if he doesn't fade away," she asked, "if he lingers? Those places cost $3,000 a month even for the cheap ones. That cuts into our bottom line." Hunter's voice dropped, but in the quiet house I heard every syllable. "If he is bedridden for more than a month," Hunter said, "we have medical power of attorney. We can make decisions about his care. If he gets pneumonia, we decline antibiotics. If he stops eating, we decline a feeding tube. We pull the plug on any life-sustaining measures. It is the humane thing to do, to save money." I lay frozen in the bed. They weren't just planning to steal my money. They were planning my death. They were discussing the end of my life as a line item on a budget. A memory washed over me, unbidden and powerful. It was 40 years ago. I was sitting in a cramped garage, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the hum of servers. Arthur Sterling was pacing back and forth, pulling at his hair. The code was broken. The entire system was crashing. He was about to lose his investors. I was just the janitor who came in to empty the trash. But I had been reading his manuals. I had been studying the lines of code on the green screens while I mopped. I saw the error. It was a syntax loop in the core processor. I had picked up a keyboard. I remembered the feeling of the plastic keys under my fingers. I typed 6 lines of code. Arthur had stopped pacing. He stared at the screen. He stared at me. "You fixed it," he had whispered. "You saved the company." He wanted to put my name on the patent. He wanted to make me a partner right then. But it was a different time. A black janitor with no degree, listed as the architect of the most advanced operating system in the world. The investors would have pulled out. The banks would have laughed. I told him to put his name on it. I told him to build the empire. I told him to just remember me. I realized then, lying in that guest bed, that I had been saving people my whole life. I saved Arthur. I saved Beatrice from loneliness. I saved Kendra from poverty. I saved Hunter from his own incompetence. And this was my reward: a cheap nursing home and a slow death to save money. A vibration against my thigh snapped me back to the present. My old flip phone, hidden deep in my pocket. I moved my hand slowly under the covers, shielding the screen's glow. One new message. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. It was O'Malley, the lawyer Arthur had assigned to me. The message was short. Micro camera in the vents recorded the poisoning. We have the footage of her putting the pills in your mouth. We have the audio of the conversation in the living room. The trap is set. Await command. I closed the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I let out a slow, steady breath. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was a line item to be erased. They were wrong. I wasn't fading away. I was just getting started. I closed my eyes, but this time I wasn't pretending to sleep. I was visualizing the look on Hunter's face when the hammer finally came down. The heavy oak door to the guest room creaked open slowly, pushing a wedge of hallway light across the floorboards. I lay motionless in the bed, my chest rising and falling in a shallow, rhythmic cadence that I had perfected over the last few hours. My eyes were closed, but my ears were straining against the silence. I knew that walk. It was not the heavy, aggressive stomp of Hunter, nor the frantic, clicking heels of Beatrice. It was a soft, hesitant step, the step of a child entering a room they were told not to enter. It was Kendra. My heart gave a painful lurch behind my ribs. Despite everything, despite the party, despite the betrayal, part of me still wanted to believe she was innocent. She was my baby girl. I remembered the day she was born, how tiny she looked in my large, dark hands. I remembered braiding her hair on Sunday mornings while Beatrice slept in. I remembered the way she used to cling to my leg when storm clouds gathered over the city. I was her protector. I was her shield against the world. Surely, she was just being manipulated by her husband and her mother. Surely, if I could just speak to her alone, if I could just explain that I wasn't sick, that I was fighting for us, she would help me. She would be the Kendra who used to save injured birds in the backyard, not the Kendra who stood silent while her husband threatened to put me in a home. I felt the mattress dip as she sat down on the edge of the bed. Her scent washed over me, expensive floral perfume mixed with the stale smoke of slim cigarettes. She took my hand. Her skin was soft, her palm warm. For a second, just 1 second, I almost squeezed back. I almost broke character to tell her it was all right that Daddy was here. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. I waited. I hoped. I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years that she would say she was sorry, that she would whisper a warning, that she would tell me she called the police. "You look so tired," she said softly, brushing a stray hair from my forehead. "It is hard to see you like this, so weak, so confused." I wanted to scream. I wasn't confused. I was the only one in this house who saw things clearly. "But maybe it is a blessing," she continued, her thumb stroking the back of my hand. "You worked so hard your whole life, scrubbing floors, fixing toilets, being invisible. You must be exhausted. It is okay to let go, Daddy. It is okay to just sleep." Her tone shifted. It wasn't comforting anymore. It was persuasive. It was the tone one uses to put a sick animal to sleep. "Hunter and Mom are making big plans," she murmured. "They are so loud, so messy. They want to put you in that terrible place, Sunshine Meadows. It sounds awful, Daddy. The reviews are nightmares. People dying of bed sores, people forgotten in hallways." My heart hammered. She knew. She knew it was a bad place and she was worried. Hope flickered in my chest again. "I won't let them put you there," she said. Thank God, I thought. Thank God for my little girl. I'm going to make sure you do not have to suffer that indignity. I'm going to make sure this ends quickly for you. Once we sell the house, I will make sure the doctors give you something stronger, something permanent. It is the merciful thing to do. You would not want to live as a burden, would you? You would not want to drain our resources when you could leave a legacy instead. The hope died. It didn't just die, it was murdered in my chest. She wasn't saving me from the nursing home because she loved me. She was saving me from the nursing home because it was too expensive. She wanted to euthanize me. She wanted to put me down like Hunter had put down my dog. The pain of it was worse than any physical blow Hunter could have landed. This was my blood. This was the child I had starved for, so she could have new shoes. This was the woman I had been so proud of yesterday. She was not a victim. She was a monster. A vibration buzzed against the nightstand. Kendra released my hand and I heard the rustle of fabric as she pulled her phone from her pocket. The ringtone was silenced, but the vibration was harsh in the quiet room. "Hey, baby," she answered. Her voice changed instantly. It dropped an octave, becoming husky and secretive. It was not the voice she used with Hunter. I listened intently, my breathing shallow. "No, I cannot talk loud," she whispered. "I am in the room with him." "Yeah, the old man. He is out cold. Hunter gave him enough sedatives to knock out a horse. He is practically a vegetable right now." She laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "Do not worry about Hunter," she said. "He is an idiot. He thinks this is about paying off his gambling debts. He thinks we are selling the house to save his legs from the loan sharks." She paused, listening to the person on the other end. "Let them break his legs," she hissed. "I do not care. In fact, I hope they do. It will make the divorce easier. Listen to me. The house is worth $300,000 cash. Plus the old man has a life insurance policy from his union days. It is another 50 grand. Once the house sells and the money hits the joint account, I am transferring it." She stood up and began to pace the small room, her heels clicking softly on the rug. "I already looked up flights to Paris," she said. "One way, just you and me, baby. We leave Hunter with the debt and the dead old man. We start over. I am done with this family. I am done with my mother's nagging and Hunter's pathetic failures. I earned this money. I put up with his smell and his embarrassing job for 30 years. I deserve a payout." I lay there realizing the depth of her deception. She was playing everyone. She was playing Hunter. She was playing Beatrice. She was playing me. She was going to steal the only asset I had left, let her husband be crippled by the mob, let her mother rot in poverty, and let me die in a drug-induced coma while she drank wine in Paris with another man. She wasn't just complicit, she was the architect of the ultimate betrayal. She hated us all. She viewed us as nothing more than stepping stones to her own freedom. "I love you too," she cooed into the phone. "Just a few more days. The realtor is coming tomorrow to list the house. Once the ink is dry, we are gone. Bye, baby." She hung up the phone. The silence returned, but the air in the room felt heavy and poisonous. I wanted to open my eyes. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her. I wanted to ask her where I went wrong. Did I love her too much? Did I spoil her? Or was she just born with a hole where her heart should be? Kendra sighed deeply, a sound of impatience. She walked back to the bed. I felt her leaning over me. Her breath smelled of mints, masking the cigarettes. "Sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "But you had your life. It was small and sad, but you had it. Now it is my turn to live. And I am not going to be a janitor's daughter forever." She started to move away, but then she stopped. I heard her pause. I felt her hand slide under my pillow. My body tensed. She was looking for something. Her fingers groped blindly under the heavy down pillow, searching in the darkness. "What is this?" she muttered. Her hand closed around the cool metal of the object I kept hidden there. It wasn't the phone. It wasn't the black card. It was the gold pocket watch. It had belonged to my grandfather, a sharecropper in Alabama. He had given it to my father, who had carried it through the war. My father gave it to me on his deathbed. It was gold-plated, scratched, dented, and it didn't keep perfect time anymore. But it was the Jenkins legacy. It was the proof that we existed, that we struggled, that we survived. I had planned to give it to Kendra's first son. She pulled it out. I heard the chain rattle. "Ugh," she said, disgusted. "This old thing. I thought it was real gold, but it looks plated. Cheap junk, just like everything else in this house." She clicked the case open. I knew what was inside. A picture of me and her mother, when we were young and happy, before the cancer took her, before Beatrice came along. "Still," she mused aloud, evaluating it like a pawnbroker. "Vintage is in right now. I bet I could get $500 for it at that antique shop downtown. Maybe more if I polish it up. That is almost enough for that new clutch I saw." She wasn't taking it for the memory. She wasn't taking it to remember her father. She was taking my family history, my grandfather's sweat and blood, and trading it for a handbag. She slipped the watch into her pocket. The weight of it leaving the bed felt like a physical amputation. "Goodbye, Daddy," she said, patting my cheek with a patronizing tap. "Sleep tight. Do not wake up. It will be easier for everyone." She turned her back to me, walking toward the door, her mind already in Paris, her heart already cold. I opened my eyes. I stared at her retreating back. The darkness of the room seemed to gather around me, transforming my grief into a cold, hard resolve. I watched her hand reach for the doorknob. In that moment, Kendra died. The daughter I loved, the little girl I carried, the woman I was so proud of. She ceased to exist. The person walking out of that door was a stranger, a thief, an enemy. I didn't blink. My eyes were dry, burning with a fury that felt like ice. I memorized the shape of her back, the way she held her head high with unearned arrogance. I mentally took a red pen and crossed her name out of my will, out of my life, out of my soul. She wanted to go to Paris. She wanted to sell my house. She wanted to sell my watch. I would make sure she never left this city. I would make sure the only place she went was a concrete cell. I would make sure she lost the lover, the money, and the freedom she coveted so much. She opened the door and the light from the hall spilled in, silhouetting her figure. She stepped out and closed the door behind her, the latch clicking softly. I lay in the dark, my eyes still wide open, staring at the wood grain of the door. I reached up and touched my cheek where she had patted me. I wiped the spot with my hand, scrubbing it hard, trying to remove the sensation of her touch. Then I reached down to my shoe and touched the black card. "You want a clutch for $500? I whispered to the empty room. "I'm going to buy the store that sells it, and I'm going to make sure you are banned for life." I sat up. The dizziness was gone. The weakness was gone. I was awake, and the wolf was no longer at the door. The wolf was in the bed, and he was hungry for justice. The house was pitch black, but I wasn't asleep. I was sitting on the edge of the mattress, fully dressed in my work clothes, my boots laced tight. The time on my flip phone read 2 in the morning. I knew they would come. Desperate men don't wait for sunrise. Hunter hadn't paid, and the loan sharks weren't the type to send a reminder email. They sent messages wrapped in brass knuckles. A sudden, thunderous crash shattered the silence. The front door hadn't been picked. It had been kicked in. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the hallway, followed by heavy, aggressive footsteps. I heard a scream. It was Beatrice, shrill and terrified, from the master bedroom. Then Hunter's voice panicked and high-pitched like a trapped animal. "Please, wait, wait," he shrieked. "I have the money. It is coming. Just give me 2 days." A deep, gravelly voice cut him off. "You had 2 days, Hunter. Time is up. Where is it?" I stood up, my joints popping, but my muscles tense and ready. I moved to the door of my room, pressing my ear against the wood. "I do not have it here," Hunter stammered. "But he does. My father-in-law, the old man in the guest room, he has cash. He hides it in his mattress. Thousands. He is a hoarder. Just go in there. Take what you want. Just do not hurt me." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just stealing from me anymore. He was offering me up as a sacrifice to save his own skin. He was sending violent men into my room, hoping they would beat the money out of me, or worse, beat me to death, so he could claim it was a robbery gone wrong. I heard the heavy footsteps turn down the hall toward my room. There were 2 of them. I could tell by the weight of their steps. One was big, lumbering. The other was lighter, faster. The door to my room exploded inward. A large silhouette filled the frame, holding a baseball bat. Behind him, a smaller man flicked open a switchblade, the silver steel glinting in the moonlight filtering through the window. "Get up, old man," the big one growled, stepping into the room. "Where's the cash?" I didn't move. I stood in the shadows by the closet, still as a statue. They looked at the bed, seeing the lump under the covers where I had stuffed pillows to look like a sleeping body. "He is asleep," the small one sneered. "Wake him up." The big man raised the bat and brought it down hard on the lump in the bed. The sound was sickening, a dull thud that would have cracked my ribs if I had been lying there. He swung again and again, tearing the fabric, sending feathers flying into the air like snow. "Where is the money?" the small one yelled, slashing at the mattress with his knife, ripping long gashes in the foam. I stepped out of the shadows. "Looking for this," I said, my voice low and calm. They both spun around, shocked. They saw an old man, a janitor, with gray hair and a stoop. They laughed. "Look at this. Grandpa wants to play hero," the big one mocked, stepping toward me. "Where's the money, Pops? Tell us before I break your hip." He swung the bat, a lazy, arrogant swing, meant to intimidate, not to kill. He underestimated me. They always underestimated me. I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. I stepped into the swing, moving faster than a man of 69 should move. I blocked his forearm with my left arm, stopping the momentum of the bat before it could gain speed. In the same motion, I drove my right palm into his chin. It was a strike I hadn't used since my days in the Recon Marines 40 years ago, but muscle memory is a powerful thing. The big man's head snapped back, his teeth clacking together with a bone-jarring sound. His eyes rolled back, and he crumpled to the floor like a sack of wet cement, dropping the bat. The small man with the knife hesitated, his eyes wide. "What the hell?" he hissed. He lunged at me, the knife aiming for my gut. He was fast, but he was sloppy. He was a street thug used to scaring people, not fighting soldiers. I sidestepped, catching his wrist in my hand. I twisted it sharply, hearing the satisfying pop of cartilage. He screamed, dropping the knife. Before he could recover, I swept his legs out from under him. He hit the floor hard, the wind knocked out of him. I grabbed him by the collar of his leather jacket and hauled him up, slamming him against the wall. "Who sent you?" I demanded, my face inches from his. "Hunter," he wheezed, terrified. "Hunter sent us. He said you were weak. He said you had cash." I threw him toward the door. He scrambled over his unconscious partner, desperate to escape the old man who had just dismantled them in 10 seconds. "Get your friend and get out," I ordered. "Tell your boss the debt is not paid, and tell him if he comes back here, I will not be so gentle." The small man dragged his groaning partner out into the hallway, leaving a trail of feathers and fear. I walked out of the bedroom, stepping over the broken doorframe. The hallway was brightly lit now. Beatrice was huddled in the doorway of her room, clutching her silk robe, looking at me as if I were a ghost. But it was Hunter who caught my attention. He was cowering behind the kitchen island, peeking out with wide, terrified eyes. He had heard the fight. He had expected screams of pain, my pain. Instead, he saw 2 hardened criminals fleeing his house, bruised and broken. And then he saw me. I stood in the center of the living room, dusting off my hands. I wasn't hunched over anymore. I stood tall, my shoulders back, my eyes clear and sharp. The facade of the frail, senile janitor was gone. In its place stood Elroy Jenkins, the man who had survived wars, poverty, and betrayal. "Hunter," I said, my voice echoing in the silent house. He stood up slowly, his legs shaking so bad his knees knocked together. A dark stain was spreading across the front of his expensive pajama pants. He had wet himself. "Dad," he stammered. I didn't know. They forced me." I walked toward him, slow and deliberate. I stopped 3 feet away, the same distance Arthur Sterling had stopped from me at the party. "You thought I was prey," I said coldly, looking down at him with pure disgust. "You thought you could feed me to the wolves to save yourself." Hunter started to cry, fat tears rolling down his cheeks. "I am sorry, Roy. I am so sorry. Please do not hurt me." I looked at the puddle forming around his feet. "I am not going to hurt you, Hunter," I said. "I do not have to. You are already dead. You just do not know it yet." I turned my back on him and walked toward the front door. The cool night air rushed in, cleansing the house of the stench of fear and betrayal. I looked out into the darkness, watching the taillights of the loan shark's car fade away. "From now on," I said without turning around, "if you or anyone else enters my room without knocking, I will break your legs. Do you understand?" "Yes," Hunter whispered. "Yes, sir." I closed the door and locked it. The lock was broken, hanging by a screw, but it didn't matter. The real security was standing in the living room. I was the security. And for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because I knew I could handle it. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers flashed through the broken front door, painting the living room in a chaotic strobe of color. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee, watching the circus unfold. Hunter was putting on the performance of a lifetime. He stood on the front porch, wrapped in a blanket, sobbing to a young police officer. He pointed a trembling finger back at the house, back at me. "He went crazy, officer," Hunter wailed, his voice pitching high with fake terror. "He has dementia. He has been violent for days. Last night he snapped. He hired those thugs. He let them in. He wanted them to hurt me because I refused to give him money for drugs. Look at the house. Look at the destruction. He did all of this in a rage. The officer, a rookie with a stern face, walked into the kitchen. His hand rested on his holster. He looked at the shattered television, the feathers from the mattress littering the hallway, and then at me. I sat calm and still, the coffee cup warm in my hands. To him, I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a suspect. "Stand up, sir," the officer commanded. "Put your hands where I can see them." I stood up slowly. I did not raise my hands in surrender. I simply placed them flat on the table. "Officer," I said, my voice steady, "my son-in-law is lying. He invited the men who broke in here. They were his loan sharks." The officer shook his head, not listening. "We have a report of a violent assault and property damage. The witness states you are mentally unstable and a danger to yourself and others. We are going to have to take you in for a 72-hour psychiatric hold until we can sort this out. Turn around." Hunter peeked through the doorway, a smirk flickering behind his tears. He thought he had won. He thought he had found the perfect way to get rid of me without getting his hands dirty. If the police took me to the psych ward, his narrative would be confirmed. I would be the crazy old man who hired hitmen. He would get the house, the power of attorney, everything. Beatrice stood behind him, clutching her pearls, looking at me with cold calculation. She wasn't crying. She was waiting for me to be removed so she could start counting the silverware. The officer pulled out his handcuffs. "Sir, turn around now. This is not a request." I looked at the officer. I looked at Hunter. I took a breath, ready to fight if I had to, but knowing that fighting a cop would only seal my fate. Then the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the rumble of heavy engines. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows roared up the street, jumping the curb and blocking the police cruisers in. Doors flew open in unison. 6 men in dark suits stepped out, looking like Secret Service agents. But it was the woman who stepped out of the middle vehicle, who stopped the officer in his tracks. She was tall, severely elegant, and radiated power like a nuclear reactor. She wore a tailored charcoal suit and carried a leather briefcase. It was Mrs. O'Malley, the most feared litigator in the state. I had seen her face on the news, but never in person. Arthur Sterling didn't send a lawyer. He sent a warhead. She marched up the walkway, her heels striking the pavement like gunshots. The private security team flanked her, pushing past the stunned police officers on the perimeter. "Officer, remove your hand from my client immediately," she barked, her voice cutting through the morning air like a whip. The rookie officer froze, his handcuffs dangling. "Who are you?" he stammered. "You cannot just park on a crime scene." "I am Patricia O'Malley, representing Mr. Elroy Jenkins," she announced, stepping into the kitchen. "And if you put those cuffs on him, I will have your badge, your pension, and your precinct commander's job before lunch." Hunter's smirk vanished. "O'Malley," he whispered. He knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. "This man is dangerous," Hunter shouted, trying to regain control. "He is senile. He attacked me." O'Malley turned to Hunter. She didn't look at him with disdain. She looked at him as if he were a stain on her shoe. "Mr. Vance, I presume?" she said, opening her briefcase. "The man who owes $200,000 to the East Side Syndicate. The man who sold his father-in-law's dog to a slaughterhouse yesterday morning." Hunter turned pale. "How do you know that?" "I know everything," O'Malley said. "And I have proof." She pulled a tablet from her bag and tapped the screen. She held it up for the police officer to see. "This is security footage from inside the home, recorded at 2:15 this morning," she narrated. On the screen, clear as day, was Hunter cowering in the hallway. The audio was crisp. We heard him begging. We heard him say, "He has cash. He hides it in his mattress. Just go in there. Take what you want." The officer watched, his eyes widening. "And this," O'Malley continued, swiping the screen. "This is from yesterday evening. The video showed Beatrice in my bedroom. It showed her taking the blue pills from her pocket. It showed her forcing them into my mouth. Then it showed her walking into the living room and saying, 'If he is bedridden for more than a month, we decline antibiotics. We pull the plug.'" The officer looked from the tablet to Beatrice. "That is conspiracy to commit murder," he said, his voice hard. Beatrice gasped, clutching her chest. "That is fake. That is a deep fake. He made it on his computer." O'Malley laughed, a dry, humorless sound. These recordings were uploaded in real time to a secure cloud server managed by Sterling Corp Security. They are time-stamped and verified. And we also have the lab results from the pills Mr. Jenkins spit out. They were not sedatives, Mrs. Jenkins. They were a high dose of muscle relaxants, mixed with an antipsychotic that is not prescribed for humans. You were poisoning him. The room went silent. The weight of the truth crashed down on Hunter and Beatrice. There was no spinning this. There was no lie big enough to cover the video evidence. Officer O'Malley said, turning back to the rookie, "I believe you are arresting the wrong man. My client is the victim of elder abuse, attempted murder, grand larceny, and conspiracy." The officer holstered his handcuffs. He looked at Hunter, who was backing away toward the back door. "Grab him!" the officer shouted to his partner. Hunter bolted. He scrambled over the broken furniture, trying to reach the patio door. But he didn't make it 3 steps. One of O'Malley's security guards, a man the size of a vending machine, stepped in his path and simply clotheslined him. Hunter hit the floor with a groan. The officer was on him in seconds, knee in his back, cuffing his hands behind him. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and filing a false police report," the officer recited. Hunter screamed, "Mom, help me! Beatrice, do something!" But Beatrice wasn't moving. She was staring at O'Malley, terrified. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know he was doing this. I was just trying to help my husband sleep." O'Malley stepped closer to her. "Save it for the jury, Beatrice. We have hours of audio. We have your text messages to the forger, Paul Hayes. We know about the fake will. We know everything." Hunter was dragged out the front door, kicking and screaming, his dignity gone, his future erased. I watched him go, feeling nothing but a cold satisfaction. "Now," O'Malley said, turning to me, her expression softening just a fraction. "Mr. Jenkins, are you all right?" "I am fine," I said, straightening my jacket. "Thank you," she nodded, then turned back to Beatrice, who was standing alone in the middle of the ruined living room. "Mrs. Jenkins," O'Malley said, pulling a sheaf of papers from her briefcase. "This is an eviction notice." "Eviction!" Beatrice shrieked. "You cannot evict me. This is my house. I have lived here for 40 years. My name is on the deed." "Not anymore," O'Malley said calmly. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, Mr. Jenkins transferred the deed of this property into a blind trust managed by the Sterling Foundation. He is the sole beneficiary. You have no legal claim to this residence. But we are married," Beatrice argued, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Marital property. You cannot just kick me out." "Actually, I can," O'Malley countered. "Given the evidence of attempted murder and the active restraining order I just filed, a judge granted an emergency exclusive occupancy order. You are a danger to my client. You have 1 hour to pack your personal effects and vacate the premises. If you remain, you will be arrested for trespassing and violating a court order." Beatrice looked at me. Her eyes were pleading now, desperate. "Roy, please, you cannot let them do this. Where will I go? I have nowhere. I am your wife." I looked at the woman who had forced me to wear a waiter's uniform to my daughter's party. I looked at the woman who had tried to drug me into a coma. "You have friends, Beatrice," I said, my voice flat. "Go stay with the church ladies you tried to impress. Tell them how you treated your husband. Maybe they will take you in." "Roy, please," she sobbed, reaching for me. I stepped back. "Security, please escort Mrs. Jenkins to her room to pack. Watch her closely. Make sure she doesn't take anything that belongs to the trust. That includes the jewelry I bought her. That was purchased with my money, and considering she tried to kill me for it, I am revoking the gift." The security guard stepped forward, flanking her. Beatrice looked at them, then at me, realizing finally that her tears had no power here. She slumped her shoulders, defeated, and let them lead her away. I stood in the silence of the living room, the sirens fading in the distance. The house was a mess. The door was broken. The TV was smashed. But the air felt cleaner. O'Malley closed her briefcase. "Mr. Sterling sends his regards," she said. "He has arranged a suite for you at the Four Seasons downtown. He thought you might want to be away from here while the cleaning crews do their work." I looked around at the walls that had held so much pain. "Yes," I said. "I think I would like that very much." I walked out the front door, leaving the door wide open. I didn't look back at Beatrice packing her bags. I didn't look back at the spot where Hunter had been arrested. I walked toward the black SUV, where a driver was holding the door open for me. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't the janitor. I wasn't the husband. I wasn't the father. I was just Elroy, and that was enough. I sat at the center table of the Lumiere, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The tablecloth was white linen, crisp and cool under my fingertips. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandeliers above. I wore a bespoke charcoal suit that Arthur's tailor had finished just hours ago. It fit my shoulders perfectly, a stark contrast to the rental tuxedo Beatrice had forced me into just days before. I checked my reflection in the silver water pitcher. The tired janitor was gone. A titan of industry stared back. I checked my watch. 7 o'clock on the dot. They walked in a moment later, Beatrice and Kendra. They looked like shadows of their former selves. Beatrice's hair was frizzy, her makeup applied with a shaky hand. Kendra wore dark sunglasses indoors, likely to hide swollen eyes. They scanned the room nervously, looking out of place among the city's elite. When they spotted me, their expressions shifted from confusion to a familiar disdain. They didn't see the suit. They didn't see the confidence. They only saw the old man they thought they owned. Beatrice marched over and pulled out her own chair, sitting down with a huff. Kendra slumped into the seat beside her, tossing her handbag onto the table, a breach of etiquette that made the nearby waiter wince. "This is ridiculous," Beatrice hissed, leaning across the table. "Look at this place, Roy. Do you have any idea what an appetizer costs here? You are burning through your pension just to prove a point. We are homeless, Roy. We are staying in a Motel 6 off the highway because you kicked us out, and here you are playing aristocrat." Kendra pulled off her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes. "Dad, this has to stop. Hunter is in jail. He is facing serious time. We need money for a criminal defense lawyer, not $12 water. If you have this kind of cash, you should be using it to fix the family you broke." I took a slow sip of sparkling water. The bubbles burst against my tongue, sharp and refreshing. "I did not break this family," I said calmly. "I simply turned on the lights. You are the ones who scrambled like roaches." Beatrice slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "Stop it with the metaphors. We are here because you said you wanted to talk, so let's talk. We want you to drop the charges against Hunter. You tell the police it was a misunderstanding. You tell them you gave him permission to sell the house. And then you sign the papers to sell the property so we can pay his bail and the lawyers." And in exchange, Kendra added her voice, taking on that wheedling, manipulative tone I used to mistake for love. "In exchange, we will forgive you, Dad. We will forget you humiliated us on the live stream. We will let you come live with us again once we get a new place. We will take care of you." I looked at my daughter. She was offering me a return to my prison, as if it were a reward. She truly believed that my highest aspiration was to be their servant again. She thought I was spending my life savings on one last desperate dinner to buy their affection. "You want me to drop the charges?" I asked. "Yes," Beatrice demanded. "He is family, Roy. You do not send family to prison." "He sent 2 hitmen to my bedroom, Beatrice," I reminded her. "He tried to have me killed. He was desperate," Kendra cried. "He was under pressure. He would never have actually hurt you. It was a scare tactic. Please, Dad. If Hunter goes to prison for 20 years, my life is over. I will be a single mother with nothing." I looked at her stomach, the baby, my grandchild, the innocent life she was using as a bargaining chip. "Your life was over the moment you decided to steal from me, Kendra," I said. "Hunter is where he belongs. And frankly, so are you." Beatrice's face turned purple. "You selfish old bastard. You are enjoying this, aren't you? You think because you were staying in a fancy hotel for a week that you were better than us. You are a janitor, Roy. You are a man who cleaned toilets for 40 years. You are nothing without me. When this money runs out, and it will run out, you will come crawling back, and I will leave you in the street." I signaled to the sommelier standing in the shadows. It was time. A tall figure in a pristine white tuxedo jacket approached the table, carrying a bottle of vintage wine that cost more than Hunter's car. He held the bottle with a white napkin obscuring the label, but presenting it with the grace of a man who owned the room. The sommelier stopped at our table. He didn't look at Beatrice or Kendra. He looked only at me. "The 1982 Chateau Margaux, sir," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "Decanted for 45 minutes as requested." Beatrice didn't even look up at the server. "We are not drinking," she snapped, waving her hand dismissively at him. "Take it away. We are not paying for that. My husband is suffering from delusions of grandeur. He cannot afford that bottle." The sommelier didn't move. He stood statue still, the bottle hovering over my glass. I said, "Take it away," Beatrice barked, snapping her fingers at him. "Are you deaf? This is a private conversation. Go fetch us some tap water and leave us alone." Kendra rolled her eyes. "God, just go. The service here is terrible." I watched them. I watched the way they treated a man they thought was beneath them. It was the exact same way they had treated me for decades. The contempt, the dismissal, the arrogance. "Pour it, Arthur," I said quietly. The sommelier tipped the bottle, and the dark ruby liquid flowed into my glass, swirling with a rich aroma of black currants and oak. He poured a generous amount, then set the bottle down on the table with a solid thud. Then he stood up straight. He pulled the white napkin from his arm and folded it neatly, placing it in his pocket. He took off his wire-rimmed glasses and cleaned them on his lapel before placing them back on his nose. Beatrice looked up, ready to scream at the impertinent waiter. Her eyes locked onto his face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She blinked once, twice. Her brain was trying to process an impossible image. The waiter was Arthur Sterling, the billionaire, the man she had tried to impress at the party, the man whose face was on the cover of Forbes magazine in the lobby newsstand. "Mr. Sterling," Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling. "What? Why are you serving wine?" Arthur smiled, but it was a smile made of steel. "I am not serving wine, madam. I am serving the chairman." Beatrice looked around the room, confused. "What chairman?" Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, respectful, a gesture of equality. "I am serving the honorary chairman of Sterling Corp," he announced, his voice projecting enough for the nearby tables to hear. "The man who owns 51% of the voting stock. The man who built the code that runs half the world. Mr. Elroy Jenkins." Kendra laughed. It was a nervous, hysterical sound. "What? That is my dad. He is a janitor. He cleaned your building. He cleaned my building because he wanted to keep an eye on his investment without being bothered by leeches like you," Arthur said, his tone sharpening. He turned to Beatrice. "You remember that $5,000 Roy took from your joint savings 40 years ago? The money you screamed at him about for a decade. The money you said he wasted on gambling." Beatrice nodded dumbly. "He gave it to me," Arthur said. "I was bankrupt. I was losing the company. Roy gave me every cent he had. He saved me, and in return, I made him a silent partner." Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, leather-bound portfolio. He placed it on the table in front of me. "These are the quarterly reports, Roy," he said. "Your dividends this quarter alone are $4 million, and the board has ratified your motion to liquidate the subsidiaries Hunter was using to launder his loan shark money." Beatrice looked at the portfolio. She looked at me. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The small apartment, the old truck, the simple clothes. It hadn't been poverty. It had been a choice, a test, and she had failed it every single day for 40 years. "You have millions," she whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. "Millions. And you let us live like that. You let me clip coupons. You let me worry about the electric bill. I let you live a debt-free life, Beatrice," I said, my voice cold. "I paid off the house 30 years ago. I paid for Kendra's college in cash. I paid for your cars. I gave you a comfortable life, but it was never enough for you. You wanted status. You wanted to be better than everyone else. If I had told you about the money, you would have spent it all. You would have become a monster sooner." "I am your wife," she screamed, standing up, knocking her chair over. "That is my money too, community property. I am entitled to half." Arthur stepped between us. "Actually, madam, you are not. The initial investment was made before you were married, and the shares are held in a blind trust based in the Caymans. Roy controls the distributions, but the asset itself is protected. You can sue. Please do. My legal team consists of 40 lawyers who get bored very easily. They would love to drag you through court for the next 10 years until you are destitute." Kendra was shaking her hands, gripping the tablecloth. "Dad," she pleaded, her eyes wide with greed and panic. "Dad, I didn't know, I swear. If I had known, I would have been different. I know," I said, sipping my wine. "That is exactly the problem, Kendra. You only treat people with respect if you think they can buy you things. You looked at me and saw a janitor, so you treated me like trash. If you had seen a billionaire, you would have loved me. That is not love. That is prostitution." The word hung in the air, ugly and true. Kendra flinched as if I had slapped her. "We are done here," I said, placing my glass down. "Arthur has security waiting to escort you out." "But the lawsuit," Beatrice stammered. "Hunter, the house." I looked at her with zero emotion. "The lawsuit proceeds. Hunter goes to prison. The house is already property of the trust. You have 24 hours to retrieve any personal items from the sidewalk where the movers left them." Beatrice's eyes rolled back in her head. She swayed and then collapsed, fainting dead away onto the plush carpet of the restaurant. It was a dramatic exit fitting for her. Kendra stood up, her face red with humiliation. In her haste to help her mother, her arm struck her glass of red wine. The expensive vintage splashed across the front of her white designer dress, staining it the color of blood. She looked down at the ruin of her outfit, then at me. "I hate you," she hissed. "I know," I replied, picking up the menu. "But unlike you, I can afford to not care." Arthur signaled 2 large security guards who had been waiting by the door. They scooped Beatrice up and took Kendra by the elbow, marching them out of the restaurant as the other diners watched in hushed fascination. I watched them go. I felt a pang of sadness for the years lost, but it was quickly replaced by the rich taste of the wine and the company of my oldest friend. Arthur sat down in the empty chair across from me. He poured himself a glass. "Well done, Roy," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his. "To new beginnings, Arthur. To new beginnings." We drank. The nightmare was over. The family that had tried to bury me was gone. And for the first time in my life, I was sitting at the head of the table, exactly where I belonged. The next morning, Kendra walked into the glass-walled headquarters of Sterling Marketing with the desperate energy of a cornered animal. She wore a trench coat over her wine-stained dress from the night before, having slept in her car to avoid the paparazzi, camping outside the motel where her mother was hiding. She marched past the reception desk, ignoring the whispers of the interns and the side-eye from the security guards. She was still the director of marketing. She still had the access codes. She still had time to drain the budget before they locked her out. She threw open the door to her corner office and slammed it shut, locking it behind her. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped her keys twice before she could sit down at her desk. She booted up her computer, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds. She needed to approve 3 fraudulent invoices. They were payments to shell companies she had set up months ago, fake vendors for consulting services that never happened. If she could push the approvals through the system, she could wire $500,000 to her offshore account within the hour. It was enough to get to Paris. It was enough to disappear. Her assistant, a young woman named Sarah, knocked timidly on the glass door. Kendra screamed at her to go away, but Sarah opened the door anyway, holding a tablet. "Director Jenkins," Sarah stammered. "The board has called an emergency, all-hands meeting. It is starting in 2 minutes in the main conference room. Your attendance is mandatory." Kendra stood up, her face twisting into a snarl. "I am busy, Sarah. I am approving critical vendor payments. Tell them I will be there in 10 minutes. Sarah didn't move. She looked at Kendra's disheveled hair, the stain on her dress, the wild look in her eyes. "I cannot do that, ma'am," Sarah said quietly. "They locked the system. No approvals can go through until the meeting is over. Your terminal is frozen." Kendra looked down at her screen. It was true. A red padlock icon flashed in the center of her monitor. "Access denied." "You incompetent little spy," Kendra shrieked, grabbing a stapler and hurling it at the wall. "You did this. You told them. You are fired. Get your things and get out. You are fired. Do you hear me?" Sarah didn't flinch. She just stepped back into the hallway. "I think you should go to the conference room, ma'am," she said coldly. "They are waiting for you." Kendra adjusted her coat, buttoning it all the way up to her chin to hide the wine stain. She grabbed her phone and marched out of the office. She would bluff her way through this. She would scream at the board. She would threaten to sue for harassment. She was Kendra Jenkins. She was untouchable. She walked into the main conference room, her chin held high. The room was packed. 200 employees sat in rows of chairs, while hundreds more from satellite offices were logged in via the massive video wall that dominated the front of the room. When Kendra entered, the room went silent. Every eye was on her. She walked to the front of the room, standing before the long mahogany table where the other executives sat. They looked at her with a mix of pity and disgust. "Why is my system locked?" Kendra demanded, slamming her hand on the table. "I have vendors waiting for payment. This is unacceptable. Who authorized this freeze?" The screen behind her flickered. The logo of Sterling Corp dissolved and was replaced by a high-definition video feed. It wasn't Arthur Sterling. It wasn't the CEO. It was me. I sat in the leather chair of the chairman's suite at the hotel, the city skyline visible through the window behind me. I looked directly into the camera lens, which meant on the giant screen in the conference room, I was 10 feet tall, looking down at my daughter. "I authorized it, Kendra," I said, my voice booming through the surround sound speakers. Kendra spun around her heels, skidding on the carpet. She looked up at the screen, her mouth falling open. "Dad," she whispered, "what are you doing? Get off the screen. This is a company meeting. You are embarrassing me." "I am not embarrassing you, Kendra," I corrected her. "I am firing you." She laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound that bounced off the glass walls. "You cannot fire me. You are a janitor. You do not even work here. Security, get this hacker off the screen." No one moved. "Actually, Ms. Jenkins," I said, leaning forward, "I own 51% of the voting shares of this company. I am the majority shareholder. I am the reason you got this job in the first place. Arthur hired you because I asked him to give you a chance. I thought if you had a good salary, you would stop stealing from me. I was wrong." A collective gasp went through the room. Employees turned to each other, whispering frantically. Kendra backed away from the screen, shaking her head. "That is a lie," she screamed. "He is lying. He is senile. He thinks he is a billionaire. Turn it off." I signaled to the technicians. The screen split. On one side was my face. On the other side, a series of documents appeared. They were enlarged so everyone in the room could read them. "This is a forensic audit of the marketing budget for the last fiscal year," I narrated. "As you can see, there are recurring payments to a company called Paris Dreams Consulting. $500,000 in total." Kendra froze. Her face turned the color of ash. "We trace the ownership of Paris Dreams Consulting," I continued. "It is registered to a P.O. box in the Caymans. The sole signatory is Kendra Jenkins. You have been embezzling company funds to pay off your husband's loan sharks and to fund your escape plan with your lover." The screen changed again. This time it showed a series of text messages. They were the messages she had sent while sitting by my bedside, while I pretended to be in a coma. The messages about letting the old man die. The messages about her lover. "Is this what you call leadership, Kendra?" I asked. "Stealing from the company that gave you a career? Plotting the death of the father who raised you?" Kendra looked at the audience. She saw her colleagues, her subordinates, the people she had bullied and belittled for years. She saw no sympathy. She saw only judgment. "It was a loan," she stammered, tears beginning to flow. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed time." And this, I said, ignoring her excuses. The screen changed to a diploma. It was a master's in business administration from a prestigious Ivy League university. It had Kendra's name on it. "We checked with the university registrar," I said. "They have no record of a Kendra Jenkins. You forged your degree. You lied on your resume. You are a fraud, Kendra. A thief and a fraud." Kendra fell to her knees, covering her ears. "Stop it," she screamed. "Stop it, Daddy, please." I looked at her huddled on the floor, the image of a broken child, but I felt nothing. The part of me that used to pity her had died the night she stole my watch. "You are terminated, effective immediately for cause," I announced. "This matter has been referred to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Security, please remove Ms. Jenkins from the building. She is trespassing." The doors at the back of the room opened. 4 uniformed security guards marched in. They weren't the regular building guards. They were federal agents, wearing windbreakers that said FBI. Kendra stood up, trying to run, trying to find a side exit, but there was nowhere to go. The agents surrounded her. "Kendra Jenkins, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage." An agent stated loud enough for the microphone to pick up. They grabbed her arms, pulling them behind her back. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent room. Kendra screamed, kicking and thrashing. "Call Jason," she yelled at the crowd, her eyes scanning for her assistant who was holding her phone. "Call Jason. He will help me. He loves me. He will post bail. I watched on the monitor as Sarah, the assistant she had fired 10 minutes earlier, walked up to the agents. She held out Kendra's personal phone, which had been buzzing incessantly on the table. "I think you should see this," Sarah said, holding the screen up to Kendra's face. It was a text message, a new one. It was from Jason, her lover, the man she was planning to run away with. The message was displayed on the lock screen. "I am watching the live stream, Kendra. You are done. Do not call me. Do not text me. I am blocking you. I am not going to jail for you. Have a nice life." Kendra stared at the phone, her last lifeline, her exit strategy. It was gone. She let out a wail that wasn't human. It was the sound of a soul being ripped apart by its own consequences. The agents dragged her out. Her heels dragged on the carpet, leaving scuff marks. Her coat fell open, revealing the wine stain, the mark of her shame. She looked back at the big screen at my face, looming over her. "Daddy," she whimpered. I looked her in the eye through the camera lens. "I do not know who you are," I said. The screen went black, the feed cut. I sat in the silence of my hotel suite, my heart beating slow and steady. It was done. She had lost her career, she had lost her reputation, she had lost her freedom, and she had lost the father who would have burned the world to save her if she had just been a decent human being. I stood up and walked to the window looking down at the city. I saw a police car pulling away from the Sterling building, lights flashing. I watched until it disappeared into the traffic. "One down," I whispered. "One to go." Hunter was out on bail. He was desperate, and a desperate man is a dangerous man. But I was ready. I touched the brass gear pin on my lapel. The game was entering its final round, and I had saved the best move for last. 3 days after I watched my daughter being dragged out of her office in handcuffs, my phone buzzed with a message that stopped my heart. It was a picture, a grainy, low-light photo of a dog tied to a rusted metal pipe. It was Buster. My blind, arthritic retriever looked terrified, his one good eye wide with panic. Below the photo was a text from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew exactly who it was. "I bought him back, Roy." The slaughterhouse guy was happy to take double. "Meet me at the old shipyard, warehouse 4. Come alone. If I see cops, the dog dies. If you do not sign over the shares, the dog dies. You have 1 hour." Hunter was out. I found out later that Beatrice had raided her jewelry box, selling the last of the pieces I hadn't legally reclaimed yet, pawning her engagement ring and even her mother's antique brooches to pay as bail bondsman. She thought she was saving her son-in-law. She had just unleashed a rabid animal. I didn't call the police immediately. Hunter was unstable. If he saw a cruiser, he would pull the trigger. He had nothing left to lose. He was facing 20 years for the conspiracy charge. Kidnapping and animal cruelty were just cherries on top of his prison sundae. But he didn't know who he was dealing with. He thought he was negotiating with a sentimental old man who missed his pet. He forgot that I was the man who built the security protocols for the most secure data centers in the world. I grabbed my keys and the tablet Arthur had given me. I opened the tracking app. When I had adopted Buster years ago, I had implanted a military-grade GPS chip in his collar. Not because I thought he would run away, but because I wanted to test a prototype for Arthur. The dot on the screen pulsed steady and strong. He was exactly where Hunter said he was. But the collar had another feature, a feature Hunter didn't know about. I drove my new truck to the docks, parking a block away in the shadow of a crane. The night air smelled of salt and diesel. I walked toward the warehouse, my steps silent on the cracked pavement. I wasn't afraid, I was focused. This was the end game. I slid through the side door of the warehouse, which hung loose on broken hinges. The interior was vast and dim-lit only by moonlight filtering through dirty skylights. In the center of the cavernous space, illuminated by a battery-powered camping lantern, stood Hunter. He looked like a ghost. His expensive suit was torn and stained with sweat. His eyes were wild, darting around the shadows. He held a revolver in his shaking hand, the barrel pressed against Buster's head. My dog whimpered, sensing my presence before he saw me. "I am here, Hunter," I called out, stepping into the circle of light. "Let the dog go." Hunter spun around, the gun wavering. He laughed, a jagged, broken sound. "You actually came. I knew you were stupid. I knew you would risk it all for a mutt." I stopped 10 feet away. "I am not risking anything. I am ending this." "Where are the papers?" Hunter screamed, waving the gun. The transfer papers. I want the 51%. I want the control. You are going to sign it over to me right now, and then I am going to disappear. I have a boat waiting." I looked at him with pity. "You really think it works like that? You think you can just sign a piece of paper and become a billionaire? You think the board would accept you? You think the banks would clear the funds? You are delusional, Hunter. You are a small man trying to wear a giant's shoes." "Shut up!" he yelled, cocking the hammer of the gun. The click echoed loudly. "Do not lecture me, janitor. You stole my life. That money was supposed to be ours. Kendra said you were hoarding it. You watched us struggle. You watched us drown while you sat on a mountain of gold. You owe me this." "I owe you nothing," I said, my voice hard. "I gave you a home. I gave you respect. I gave you the benefit of the doubt, even when I saw you were lazy and entitled. You stole from me. You tried to kill me. And now you are threatening an innocent animal because you are too weak to face your own failures." "I am not weak," Hunter shrieked, tears mixing with the grime on his face. "I am a businessman. I am a closer. I do what it takes to win. You are just lucky. You got lucky with a computer 40 years ago. You didn't earn it. I earned it. I put up with your daughter. I put up with your wife. I put up with your smell. That is work, Roy. That is suffering. Is that what you tell yourself?" I asked, taking a slow step forward. "You think suffering is living in a house you didn't pay for, driving a car you didn't buy? You know nothing about suffering. Suffering is watching your wife die of cancer because you cannot afford the best doctors. Suffering is scrubbing floors until your hands bleed so your daughter can have braces. Suffering is realizing the family you built is a nest of vipers." Hunter pointed the gun at me, then back at Buster. "Stop walking. Sign the papers or I paint the floor with his brains." I stopped. I reached into my pocket. Hunter's eyes lit up, thinking I was reaching for the documents. "I didn't bring any papers, Hunter," I said. He froze. "What?" "I brought this." I pulled out the tablet. "What is that?" he asked, confused. "This is the remote control for the collar," I said calmly. Hunter looked down at Buster's neck. The old leather collar looked normal, worn and frayed. "It is a prototype," I explained, high-frequency audio emitter, used for crowd control testing, or in this case, pest control. Hunter sneered. "You are bluffing. It is a dog collar. Try me," I said. "Or better yet, put the gun down and turn yourself in. This is your last chance." "No," Hunter screamed, raising the gun. "No more chances. You die. The dog dies. Everyone dies." I tapped the screen. A piercing sound erupted from the collar. It was silent to the human ear, but to a dog, it was a thunderclap. Buster yelped and lunged backward, with the force of a cannonball, snapping the rotten rope Hunter had used to tie him. At the same time, the collar emitted a secondary frequency, a sonic pulse designed to disorient. Hunter screamed, dropping the gun and clutching his ears. His equilibrium shattered. He stumbled backward, falling over his own feet. Buster ran to me, cowering behind my legs. Now I yelled. The skylights above shattered. Ropes dropped from the ceiling. A dozen SWAT officers in tactical gear rappelled down surrounding Hunter before he could even reach for his weapon. The side doors burst open, and more officers flooded in, weapons drawn. Hunter lay on the floor, curled into a ball, sobbing as they cuffed him. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He just broke. Arthur Sterling walked in behind the SWAT team, flanked by O'Malley. He looked at Hunter, then at me. "Sonic collar?" Arthur asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought we discontinued that project." "I kept one for emergencies," I said, scratching Buster behind the ears. Hunter was hauled to his feet. He looked at me, his eyes empty. "Why?" he whispered. "Why didn't you just give me the money?" "Because, Hunter," I said, watching them drag him away, "you cannot buy character, and you were bankrupt long before you met me." I walked out of the warehouse, my dog by my side. The night was cold, but I didn't feel it. The last threat was gone. The only thing left to do was clean up the mess Beatrice had made, and then finally start living the life I had earned. The rain fell in sheets, turning the city streets into rivers of gray sludge. It was a cold, relentless downpour, the kind that soaked through to the bone in seconds. I stood under the awning of the hotel, watching the valet bring around the black limousine Arthur had insisted I use. I was buttoning my coat when I saw her. Beatrice. She was standing on the sidewalk, drenched. Her expensive coat was heavy with water, and her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was plastered to her skull. She looked small. She looked old. She looked nothing like the woman who had terrorized me for 40 years. When she saw me, she didn't march over with her usual entitlement. She ran, stumbling in her heels, and threw herself onto the wet pavement at my feet. "Roy!" she wailed, grabbing the hem of my trousers. "Roy, please, you have to listen to me." I looked down at her. Passers-by stopped staring at the woman kneeling in the rain, but I didn't care. The shame I used to feel whenever she made a scene was gone, replaced by a numb curiosity. "Get up, Beatrice," I said, my voice barely carrying over the sound of the rain. "You are embarrassing yourself." "I do not care," she sobbed, looking up at me with mascara running down her cheeks like black tears. "Let them look. I want the world to know. I am sorry. Roy, you have to believe me. It was Hunter. It was all Hunter. He manipulated me. He threatened me. He said if I didn't help him get the money, he would hurt you. He would hurt Kendra. I was scared, Roy. I was a terrified old woman trying to protect her family." She clung to my leg, her grip desperate. I looked into her eyes, searching for a shred of truth. I saw only fear. Not fear for me, but fear of the poverty she was now facing. "He twisted my mind, Roy," she continued, her voice rising to a shriek. "He made me think you were sick. He told me the medicine would help you. I didn't know it was poison. I swear on my mother's grave I didn't know. I am your wife. I am your Beatrice. We have 40 years, Roy. 40 years of memories. You cannot throw that away because of a son-in-law who tricked us. I am a victim too." It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't heard the recordings, if I hadn't heard her voice discussing pulling the plug on my life support to save money, I might have wavered. She was playing the role of the loyal, confused wife to perfection. She was trying to rewrite history to make herself the martyr. I watched her cry. I watched her shiver. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. She wasn't a victim. She was a predator who had been caught in her own trap. "Stop acting, Beatrice," I said, pulling my leg away from her grasp. She froze, her mouth open in a silent plea. "I am not acting," she whispered. "I love you." I reached into the inside pocket of my dry, warm coat. My fingers closed around a thick manila envelope. O'Malley's investigators had been thorough. They had dug deep, not just into the last few months, but into the last 40 years. They had found the skeletons Beatrice thought were buried deep in the closet. I pulled the envelope out. It was sealed with red wax, a dramatic touch from O'Malley, but fitting for the occasion. "You say you love me," I said, holding the envelope just out of her reach. "You say you hid me at the party because you were ashamed of my clothes. You say you hid me because you didn't want me to embarrass Kendra." "Yes," she nodded frantically. "I was trying to protect your dignity, Roy. You know how judgmental those people are." I laughed. It was a cold sound. "No, Beatrice. You didn't hide me because of my clothes. You hid me because of him." I dropped the envelope. It landed on the wet pavement with a heavy slap, splashing water onto her knees. "Open it," I commanded. Beatrice looked at the envelope, then at me. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She tore it open, protecting the contents from the rain with her body. She pulled out a stack of photographs. I watched her face as she looked at the first one. All the color drained from her skin, leaving her gray and ash. It was a photo from 10 years ago. It was taken at a church picnic. In the photo, Beatrice was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting intimately on the chest of a man who wasn't me. It was Pastor Williams, the man who had baptized our daughter, the man who sat at our dinner table every Sunday. "Keep looking," I said. She shuffled to the next photo. It was them entering a motel room on the outskirts of town. The timestamp was from a Tuesday afternoon, when she was supposed to be at choir practice. The next photo was of a bank transfer, $5,000 from our joint savings account to a personal account in Williams's name. "You didn't hide me because I was a janitor," I said, my voice cutting through the rain. "You hid me because Williams was at those parties. You hid me because you didn't want your husband and your lover in the same room. You were afraid I would see the way you looked at him. You were afraid I would notice that the new stained glass window at the church cost exactly the same amount as the emergency fund I thought we had lost in a bad investment." Beatrice dropped the photos. They scattered on the wet ground faces, smiling up from the puddles. That was years ago, she whispered, her voice hoarse. It ended. He left. He left because the money ran out, I corrected her. He left because I stopped working double shifts and the well went dry. You used my sweat, my broken back to pay for your affair. You made me feel small. You made me feel inadequate, while you were laughing at me with a man who preached about sin on Sundays. Roy, please, she begged, reaching for me again. It was a mistake. I was lonely. You were always working. I was working for us, I roared, my control finally slipping. I was scrubbing floors so you could have that coat. I was fixing pipes so you could drive that car. And you paid me back with betrayal. You poisoned my body last week, but you poisoned my soul 10 years ago. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. The facade was gone. The loyal wife was gone. There was only a cheater kneeling in the rain, surrounded by the evidence of her sins. The black limousine pulled up to the curb, the tires hissing on the wet asphalt. The driver, a large man with an umbrella, stepped out and opened the rear door for me. The interior was warm, lit by soft amber lights. It looked like a different world, a world of safety and comfort. I looked at Beatrice one last time. She was shivering violently, now the cold finally seeping through her adrenaline. "Where will I go?" she whispered, looking up at me with terrifying emptiness. They took the house. They froze the accounts. The church council saw the police report about the poisoning. They asked me not to come back. I have no one, Roy. I looked at the woman who had planned to put me in a state-run nursing home to rot. I looked at the woman who had discussed my death as a financial strategy. "You have the truth now, Beatrice," I said. "It does not keep you warm, but it is all you have left." I stepped into the car. The leather seat welcomed me. The air smelled of expensive cedar and silence. "Roy!" she screamed, scrambling to her feet, trying to rush the door. "Do not leave me. I will die out here." The driver stepped in front of her, blocking her path with a wall of muscle. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, an immovable object. I pulled the door shut. The heavy thud of the latch engaging was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a book closing. It was the sound of a prison cell unlocking. Through the tinted glass, I saw her pounding on the window, her mouth moving in silent screams, her face distorted by the rain and her own misery. She looked like a ghost fading away into the gray afternoon. "Drive," I said to the chauffeur. The car pulled away smoothly, gliding into the traffic. I didn't look back. I didn't watch her collapse onto the sidewalk. I didn't watch her gather the wet photos of her betrayal. I looked forward. The rain streaked against the windows, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass gear pin. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling the ridges, the imperfections. It was old, it was worn, but it was still strong, just like me. I put the pin back in my pocket and leaned my head back against the seat. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 40 years, I didn't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow was handled. Tomorrow was mine. 6 months later, the blinding lights of the Sterling Convention Center stage washed over me. But this time, I did not feel the urge to hide in the shadows. I stood at the podium, wearing a navy blue suit that cost more than the house I had grown up in. But on the lapel, I wore the same tarnished brass gear pin my father had given me. It was the only piece of my past I had kept. The rest, I had burned. I looked out at the sea of faces. 3,000 employees, investors, and journalists were silent, waiting for the chairman to speak. Beside me stood Arthur Sterling, beaming with pride. "For 40 years, I began, my voice amplified by the massive sound system. I lived in the dark. I watched from the corners while others took credit for the work of the silent. I watched families destroyed by greed, and I watched good people broken by poverty. But today, we changed the narrative." I motioned to the side of the stage. A young man walked out. He was 17 years old, wearing a suit that was clearly his first. His name was Marcus. He wasn't my blood relative. He wasn't a business associate. 2 months ago, he was the shoeshine boy in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel. I had watched him for weeks. I watched him work 12-hour days with a smile. I watched him return a wallet a guest had dropped without taking a single dollar. I watched him study his high school textbooks in between customers. He had the hunger I once had, but he also had the integrity my children lacked. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder, I am proud to announce the launch of the Jenkins Foundation. We are starting with an endowment of $50 million. Our mission is to find the invisible people, the janitors, the servers, the laborers who built this country. We will provide full scholarships, legal aid, and housing support. And leading our youth initiative as the first recipient of the Jenkins Scholarship and my personal mentee is Marcus Williams. The crowd erupted. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. Marcus looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins," he whispered. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't, son," I said, and I meant it. I had rewritten my will that morning. The trust that Kendra and Hunter had tried to steal was now designated to the foundation. Marcus would eventually sit on the board. My legacy wouldn't be a bloodline of vipers. It would be a legacy of lifting others up. I looked at the camera, at the red light broadcasting this moment to the world, and I allowed myself a small, cold smile. I knew exactly who was watching. In the common room of the maximum security correctional facility, the television was bolted high on the wall, protected by a cage of steel mesh. The picture was grainy, and the color was washed out, but the image was unmistakable. It was Elroy Jenkins, standing tall and proud, handing a giant check to a stranger. Kendra sat at a metal table, her orange jumpsuit hanging loosely on her frame. She had lost 20 pounds. Her hair was chopped short, a mandatory regulation cut that highlighted the gaunt hollows of her cheeks. She stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, her eyes fixed on the young boy standing next to her father. "That should be me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "That is my money. That is my inheritance." She looked around the room. Other inmates were playing cards or staring at the walls, indifferent to the news. No one cared who she used to be. No one cared that she was supposed to be in Paris. On the other side of the room, separated by the invisible lines of prison politics, Hunter sat with his head in his hands. He had seen the broadcast too. He had seen the headlines scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Jenkins Foundation launches with historic $50 million endowment. $50 million, Hunter moaned, rocking back and forth. "We sold the dog for $50. We tried to kill him for a house worth $300,000, and he had $50 million. Kendra turned on him, her eyes blazing with a hatred that had only grown hotter over the last 6 months of confinement. "It is your fault," she screamed, leaping up from the table. "You and your gambling, you and your loan sharks. If you hadn't been so desperate, we could have waited. We could have played the long game. I would be on that stage. I would be wearing those diamonds." Hunter shot up his face, twisting into a snarl. "Me? You were the one who wanted to poison him. You were the one who stole his watch. You were the one planning to run away with Jason. Do not act innocent, Kendra. You are in here because you are greedy. I am in here because I married a loser," she shrieked, lunging at him. A guard stepped between them, his baton raised. "Sit down, inmate Jenkins," he barked, "or you go to solitary." Kendra collapsed back onto the bench, sobbing. She looked up at the TV again. The camera zoomed in on Elroy's face. He looked peaceful. He looked powerful. He looked like a man who had forgotten she existed. "He replaced me," she sobbed, burying her face in her rough hands. "He found a shoeshine boy, and he replaced me." Hunter stared at the floor. He thought about the leather seats of his Mercedes. He thought about the expensive suits. He thought about the way he used to make Elroy walk in the cold. "We deserve this," he muttered, a moment of clarity piercing his narcissism. "We deserve every bit of this." The news segment ended, moving on to the weather. The screen changed to a map of sunshine and clear skies. But in the prison common room, it felt like winter would never end. The sun was setting over Lake Clearwater, painting the water in shades of violet and gold. The air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. I sat in a folding chair, a fishing rod in my hand, the line disappearing into the dark water. Next to me, Arthur Sterling sat in a matching chair, a bucket hat pulled low over his eyes. We hadn't spoken in an hour. We didn't need to. It was the comfortable silence of two men who had fought their wars and survived. The only sound was the gentle lap of water against the dock and the distant call of a loon. "You did good today," Roy Arthur said finally, his voice low. "The kid, Marcus, he has a good heart." "He does," I agreed, reeling in the line a few inches. "He reminds me of us back in the day. Hungry, but honest." Arthur nodded. "Do you miss them?" He didn't have to specify who. I thought about the question. I thought about the empty house. I thought about the silence that used to feel lonely, but now felt like freedom. I miss who I thought they were, I said, looking out at the horizon. I miss the idea of them, but I do not miss the people who tried to kill me. I mourned them months ago, Arthur. They are ghosts to me now. A buzzing sound broke the peace. It came from the wooden table between us where my new smartphone sat. The screen lit up, bright and intrusive in the twilight. I glanced at it. The caller ID read, State Correctional Facility. Collect call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Arthur looked at the phone, then at me. He didn't say a word. He let me make the choice. I reached out and picked up the phone. I looked at the notification. It could be Kendra begging for a lawyer. It could be Hunter blaming Beatrice. It could be Beatrice herself calling from a shelter, using her one phone call to guilt-trip me. They wanted one last connection, one last chance to drag me back into their mud. I turned the phone over in my hands. I located the small slot on the side. Using my thumbnail, I popped the tray open. The tiny SIM card fell out onto the wooden dock. It was a small piece of plastic and silicone, but it held the digital bridge to my past. I picked up the SIM card. I felt its edges. Then, with a decisive snap, I broke it in half. I tossed the pieces into the air. They caught the last light of the sun before splashing into the lake, sinking down into the deep, cold water, to rest among the stones and the weeds. Roy Arthur asked, a smile playing on his lips, "Who was that?" I picked up my fishing rod again, feeling the tension in the line. I looked at the ripples where the SIM card had vanished. "Wrong number," I said. Suddenly the tip of my rod jerked down violently. The reel sang as the line stripped out. It was a big one, a fighter. I stood up, the adrenaline rushing through me, not from fear, but from the thrill of the catch. I braced my feet against the wood and started to reel. "Get the net, Arthur," I shouted, laughing for the first time in years. "Get the net!" The fish jumped, breaking the surface in a spray of silver water. It was free, it was wild, and so was I. "The fish are biting, Arthur." My family saw a janitor and treated me with contempt, proving that their love was conditional on my net worth. They chased gold and lost their souls, while I found richness in peace and integrity. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, respect, and how you treat someone when you think they have nothing to offer you. Never let anyone measure your value by the clothes on your back or the job title on your badge. Your dignity is priceless. If you enjoyed seeing justice served and believe that character matters more than cash, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven them?